Hello folks, welcome to Lexi IAS Academy. In this video, we will be discussing a current affair topic presented to you by your faculty, Sushma KP. So what is it that we are going to be looking into today's article is we will be having a highlight of your economy. We will be seeing certain positives as well as the negatives. In this article, we will be discussing as to why is it in news, what is the relevance of it into your UPSC, that is your GS paper 3. We will also be seeing the key highlights, certain positives as well as negatives of the economy. Firstly, why is it in news? Recently, the second quarter growth has been not very satisfactory, for which the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has claimed that no, this is just a temporary blip. Whereas your RBI has reduced its forecasted growth. Look at this. RBI has downgraded its GDP growth forecast for 24-25 to 6.6% from 7.2% earlier. This is the reason why we are discussing this. Let's get into the topic. Just to make sure that we are on international aspect, seeing about our nation's growth, countries like your China, Japan and South Korea, while they were in their rapid development phase, they all grew at 8% consistently. Or on an average, they maintained that 8%, but one main important thing is it was a sustained growth, which means it's not that 1 year it's a high predicted growth, the very next year it's going on the slump. So on a sustained manner, it grew 8%. The same thing now, India is in the same phase. It is in the rapid growth phase, but we are not able to sustain this. Now, just now in the previous slide, we just saw that India's second growth reports is very low, or that is what your RBI has reduced its forecast itself. So, I told you previously your China, Japan, South Korea and all were growing at 8% in their rapid economic phase. For a developing country like India, a 6% growth rate, that is 6% means 6+%, let's assume. 6+% growth rate, is it enough? Now, ideally, if you are seeing, you can tell 6% growth rate considering your economic slowdown, considering your pandemic, considering the issues in the West Asia issues, also now your crisis, war-torn countries, etc. Considering all the 6%, we can say, consistently for 6% growing, fine. But if you take specifics with respect to India, we have to highlight this. It is not about whether 6% is enough. Is this 6% enough to produce 8 million jobs? And this has to be in a sustained manner up until your 2030. So can we do this with this growth? Now this will put us in the question. So is this sufficient? This is what differs us from the previous rapid growing economies to us, because India has to look into its generational mobility. GDP growth of 5.4%, your second quarter report is very disheartening, but whereas again, like we discussed, your Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has claimed it is just a temporary blip. Your Nilkant Mishra has held that India is undergoing a loss in momentum, and it is because of unintended fiscal and monetary tightening. Why is it? We will see further. Similarly, Nomura, it's a Japanese firm which has held that Indian economy is undergoing cyclical growth slowdown, alongside your RBI giving the estimate of 7.2% as GDP growth is over ambitious. Amidst this, RBI predicting 7.2% growth rate is, again we will be discussing as to why this is all happening, but 7.2% GDP growth rate is very overly ambitious based on this. Further discussions down, your RBI went ahead to bring down the GDP as we saw 6.2%. So, what are some of the positives that is happening in the economy? First and foremost, the government spending is increasing. The government spending is increasing alongside your cash reserve ratio is also cut. When your cash reserve ratio gets cut, which means the banks, the amount that it has to store with the RBI is also reduced, which means there is more inflow of income or cash which you can use it for spending. So which means money is coming into the economy. Usually, whenever major changes keep happening, the economy undergoes a shock. Similarly, during the same shock, the economy shrinks abnormally. One of the main reasons for the economy to shrink is your pandemic. We are in post-COVID world. In this post-COVID world, it is normal for the economy to shrink. But what it is to happen is it will recurve back. It will bounce back. Now this bouncing back is where the issue is. To bounce back, pandemic was not the only event which happened. Simultaneously, we are having much more issues. For example, we are having issues over your Red Sea. We are having tensions and conflicts in the West. And also Western countries' demand is also decreasing. What demand? Further on we'll discuss. Consistently, if you see the GDP growth, it's been reducing from 8.6 to 7.8 to 6.7 to 5.4% in your second quarter. Now, if you look at some of the indicators as to how the economy is doing, look at this. These are all the commodity prices. The commodity prices as predicted by a World Bank. Look at this. This is for fertilizers. It has been seeing a sharp decline throughout your, that is what we are talking about, all this data is post-pandemic. That is from 2022 onwards to present time we will be seeing. So is there a recurving? Is there any changes or is it still in the slump? So the fertilizer is still in the slump. Next is your food. Food pretty much has stayed in the same zone. One thing is, when we say food has been staying in the same zone, when you look at food prices inflation, it is in double digit. Next, your metals and minerals. Look at this. That is also on the same lines. It is not having much of an impact. If you look at the global growth, India is comparatively having a good global growth compared to your 2024, but in 2025, the projection, see the difference, the projection is falling down. Your Chief Economic Advisor, V. Anant Nageshwaran, has held that we will be on track to achieve between 6.5 to 7%, because now right now we are in 5.4%, right? So he has claimed that yes, we will be in no time back in your 6.5 to 7%. That is not the issue, but the focus is on how to make sure that we grow at a sustainable rate. This was the very first topic that we discussed. Fast going rapid economies like your China, South Korea and Japan, Whenever you say you are a rapid growing economy, one of the main things is your GDP has to be high. But at the same point of time, it has to be sustained, which means like now, for example, we are telling, no, 5.4%, the second quarter itself it fell. No, the average wise you have to not fall below the limit. Whereas for India, it is. Multiple reasons. So we are having huge high inflation. For example, our inflation is in the higher bracket of the permissible number alongside double digit food inflation. Look at this. How to make sure that we grow at a sustainable rate in a world that is going to be extraordinarily difficult. Your former RBI Governor Raghunath Rajan has also held that if India goes at the same pace, then visualizing Vikshit Bharat by 2047 becomes very difficult. So, one of the key attributes for our economy is you have to grow, but at the same point of time, the growth has to be sustained. It cannot be keeping on falling or otherwise termed as temporary blip. If it is a temporary blip, it is well and good. But if it sustains, then that is where the issue is. One of the key issues is GDP growth is projected to settle around 6.5%. But at the same point of time, RBI is giving a more of a rosy estimation of projecting a higher growth. But again, each time it is falling, they are recorrecting the course. The inflation is in the higher end of or higher bracket of permissible limit plus 2-digit food inflation plus economic slowdown. And does the economy seem like it is going to change? It is going to pick up the pace. That also has multiple issues. For example, your urban spheres, if you see, the growth is not picking up the pace or momentum. Rather, what your Nestle India, etc. have termed it as soft. Softness is visualized, which means the momentum is not getting picked up. So, despite these things, let's see certain positives as well as certain negatives that is getting hampered. First and foremost, the possibility of MSME recovery can be seen. How? See, we are witnessing corporate growth is slowing down. They had tax rate cuts, etc. Yes, but despite that, the corporate growth rate is slowing. MSME sector has also had issues in the form of your demonetization, and also one main thing is they were hit with GST implementation, and largely their services, etc. got very much affected during your pandemic. But now there is a recovery, there is a possibility of a recovery. Why are we saying there is a possibility of a recovery? First and foremost, comparing to the rural and urban, rural consumption is increasing. Despite urban consumption is experiencing a slowdown, that is what I meant in previously, where your Nestle India is claiming urban consumption is experiencing a slowdown. One of the reason is because of your food inflation. Whereas the rural is picking up the pace compared to the urban, which means consumption pattern is increasing in the rural areas. And also one main thing is, if you look at employment opportunities, salaried workers have, the percentage has been seen on an upward trend, meaning what? People getting associated with MSMEs are on a higher trend. And one of the key component is women participation or female participation in labor force is also very much increasing. Women who have been found out, almost your postgraduate and above women, 39% of them seem to be employed in some sort of economic activity. Whereas when you see for women with respect to your high school education, they are, or secondary education, the percentage is 23% of them seem to be employed. This is compared to your last fiscal year, this is a good growth. So based on this, meaning what, they have been employed in your MSMEs. MSMEs are now trying to be offering a lucrative opportunity to draw them into the economic force. So these are all the possible conditions which might lead to MSME recovery and giving a competition to the corporate. One more important thing about your MSME growth would lead to, right now India is undergoing a K-shaped recovery. Meaning what? What is this K-shaped recovery is? Look at this. One side we have a recession. One side we have pandemic. Both of these are bad combinations. But when we say K-shaped recovery, because of one possible things of the growth of MSME is both the lines can get narrower, which means it actually your economy can recover. How? First and foremost, understand one thing, each state will recover on its own time, on its own pace. Second thing, whenever your recession, that is bringing your economic slowdown, has to be reduced, etc. and all, when this is happening, your MSME is playing a major boost. So with K-shaped recovery, India is trying to go through K-shaped recovery, but each state is having it on its own pace, on its own time. That is the highlight. There is, without doubt, we have service surplus in India. Almost we are at 9.1%, almost 50% of our GDP growth is contributed by a service sector. One thing that aided this is your shipping costs throughout increased because of your Red Sea conflict, and also your supply got disrupted due to the conflicts in West. So it all worked in favor of India, especially with respect to the IT services. But there is also a concern that we have to be looking at, that is your growing artificial intelligence. If at all we are not inculcating this into our services, then it becomes difficult, because our entire GDP, almost 50% of it is dependent on that, right? Next, we will look into certain negatives. First and foremost, we are having very sluggish investments. The investments are not on a higher basis like we expected. Why? Softness in urban demand, that is what we mentioned. Whereas this is balanced by your rural consumption. That is one of the positives. Your car makers are crying that there is excessive heavy rains, demand is reducing, and also one main thing in India is it is election season. So when your election dust settles down, going back to the normal is also a very high possibility. One more issue is your savings investment gap, wherein your RBI's financial stability report has held that your household's savings has fell from 5.3%, has fell to 5.3% from 7.3%. Now when asked on this, the finance ministry has held that is because your households are taking advantage of your active interest rates, that is your lower interest rates, and they are actively investing in physical assets. This is what your finance ministry is claiming as to why is there a reduction in savings investment gap. And another main issue is your sliding credit growth. One main section that borrows to meet the demands is your household sector, but recently we have seen a dip in that also. So if this has to come back in track, the heavy lifting has to be done by your government. The other thing is your fiscal prudence. Your RBI is very much concerned about the increasing expenditure of states for your handout schemes, such as your loan waivers, subsidies, etc. So this is the fear of your RBI, which it is portraying that the states are very much losing their purse strings and have gone into a competition. It's become more of which state is spending more on what. So these are some of the factors about your economy. We've reached the end of the content. If you do like our content, subscribe to our channel, hit the like button and share it along with your friends. Thank you.